Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So I have some questions, not too many. So let's just jump in. The first set of questions have to do with some thoughts related to my khutbah of this last Friday. So the first question, it says, in your khutbah last week, you mentioned that the Ahlul Bayt who sacrificed their lives for the sake of Islam and the moral responsibility to uphold the truth. Do the modern day Ahlul Bayt have a moral responsibility as such? If so, how can it be applied in modern day life? So of course, if somebody is related to the Prophet ﷺ, there's that extra responsibility without doubt, because it's something that is genetic. But more importantly, all of us, we have that responsibility. So the hadith that I mentioned last Friday of the Prophet ﷺ saying, I'm leaving two things, إِنِّي تَارِكٌ فِيكُمْ مَا إِن تَمَسَّكْتُمْ بِهِمَا لَمْ تُضِلُّوا بَعْدِي كِتَابُ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَةِ أَهْلِ بَيْتِي. I'm leaving you these two things, and another narration, these two heavy things, الثقلين, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and my family. So the family of the Prophet ﷺ, there are multiple functions. One function is that they remind us of Rasulullah ﷺ, because Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ, we have caused your remembrance to be far and wide, meaning that the Prophet ﷺ, through the family of the Prophet ﷺ, the descendants of Rasulullah ﷺ, we are reminded of him. And the second thing is that we are ordered to respect them and to pay homage to them and to protect them and to see them out of difficulty if we find them in difficulty. So all of that applies then, and all of that applies now, and it will continue to apply for the rest of time, inshallah. For our children who are Ahlul Bayt, what is your advice on explaining to them the honor of this term so that they get it? The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith sahih, يوم القيامة ينقطع كل سبب ونسب إلا سببي ونسبي. On the day of judgment, all family ties and all links and all lineage ties will be separated except for those who are tied to me. So it is a great honor to be the descendants of the Prophet ﷺ. Is a sign of nobility. And therefore, if your children are the descendants of the Prophet ﷺ, you should remind them that they are of noble birth and that they are to act nobly. I also mentioned in the khutbah the danger. Wait, there was something else about Ahlul Bayt. Okay. No. Okay. In the khutbah last week, you mentioned the danger of those who speak on behalf of Islam that don't practice Islam. How do we vet those types of people online and in our universities? For example, someone wants to study Islam in university. What universities would you suggest to gain knowledge from qualified sources? I suggest that people seek knowledge from those who are known to carry the tradition of Islam. And there are multiple and many Islamic institutes of learning around the world. There are some that are in this country, there are some in Europe, and some in the other parts of the English-speaking world that are qualified institutes of learning, and they have graduates, and the graduates have degrees, and they are examined, and I teach at some of these places. So those are places that are known. If somebody is a graduate of Al-Azhar in Egypt, if somebody is a graduate of Al-Qaraween in Morocco, if somebody is a graduate of Zaytuna in Tunisia, if somebody has graduated from some of the Ma'ahid, the institutes of learning of Syria, if somebody studied in the Mauritanian system, in the maqra'as of the Mauritanian system, these are all known Sunni institutes for learning. So when you seek somebody out, they have to present to you their lineage of learning. Where did they study? How did they study? Who did they study with? Who licensed them? Just like you would in any other field. The problem is that we have confused people that speak for knowledgeable people. In other words, just because somebody speaks frequently about Islam does not necessitate that they are knowledgeable about Islam, just like any other field or any other topic. So there has to be a legitimacy. If somebody's going to stand here and speak or teach about Islam or answer questions or guide a community or serve in a community, there has to be quality. Why do you listen to this person? So why do you listen to your physician? Or why do you listen to your accountant? Or why do you listen to your lawyer? Or why do you listen to a person who's successful at business and you want to start your own business and you go talk to them and you want them to mentor you? Why would you do that? Because that person has legitimacy in that field. They have a proven track record. It's the same thing with us. Somebody has to have a proven track record that they've studied the Sharia, that they have studied the different Islamic disciplines to a medium level, and can help field questions, and more importantly, can tell you when I can't answer that question, you have to go to somebody else. So you're not going to learn Islam from a Western university. If the questioner is saying, what universities do you suggest? You're not going to go to a university in this country and learn Islam, because the Islam that is taught at these universities is not our practiced Islam. It is about Islam. It's not Islam from an insider's point of view. So my suggestion of people that want to do that is that they need to first have 2 to 4 years of training, proper Islamic training, and then they can go to the university and then they could sort of dabble in that a little bit, but they will have a background. My experience is that people that go from their home to the university to study Islam, they end up leaving Islam in some way, shape, or form, or they end up wanting to change Islam. And it has the opposite effect. Now, another problem with this is that there is an economics behind it. In other words, nobody wants their children, or very few people want their children to go study the Sharia, because studying the Sharia is not going to lead to some sort of financially successful job, or not even that. It doesn't even lead to a known path. What do you do with such a degree? So I want to go to Al-Azhar and get a PhD. Well, what are you going to do with that? Unless you're in that part of in that part of the world. So it becomes something that it's always going to be few in number. And then those people are known, and alhamdulillah, with technology, those people are accessible. And I strongly caution people from taking knowledge from those who do not have any training or cannot produce for you or even answer that question, where have they been trained and why do they have the right to speak? Okay, in Jummah, there is a lot of chatter and movement. It's very disruptive. You said a person's prayer is not accepted if they speak during the khutbah. So last Friday, there was a lot of talk, a lot. It was like a high school cafeteria. So I stopped the middle of the khutbah and I addressed that. And I asked people to be quiet, because the khutbah is established so that we listen to it. For better or for worse, you have to listen to the khutbah, to the khatib. And I do my best to make the khutbah as short as possible for that reason, because I respect that there's attention issues with many people, including myself. But the Prophet ﷺ told us that the person who speaks during the khutbah, they lose the reward of the khutbah. Their prayer is still valid, but they lose the reward. So it's like the person who fasts, but the whole day they're cussing and they're swearing and they're lying and this and that. And then the Prophet ﷺ said at the end of the day, all they got from their fast is that they were hungry and thirsty, meaning they lost the reward of the real reward of the act. Yes, this is a problem at this mosque. And I've noticed it, and I don't think I've ever addressed it until last Friday, because it was just it was too much. And this is very important that we remember that the 10 to 25 minutes of the khutbah, that's time that we need to be attentive. Another challenge that we have specifically at this mosque is that people, for some reason, they don't get the movement flow of where you go. So you walk into the hall, and you need to go to the other end of the hall and fill up that space first. So what ends up happening is that the people that run the mosque are trying to move people around, and sometimes we're a little selfish and we want to be in the front, or we want to lean our back or something like that. So we also have to be mindful that when we come into the khutbah and it's coming, that this applies to all of us, except for the khatib. Everyone's got to be quiet. How can we implement the notion in our mosque? Or what would you suggest is we have to talk about it. There have to be signs up. Maybe there can be temporary signs just for Jummah. And it's just education. I don't think people are talking out of not respecting the khutbah or not wanting to be. I mean, they're here, they're physically in the mosque, they could be anywhere else. I think it's just a lack of awareness. So this is something where we just have to raise the awareness in the mosque. Some people mourn throughout the month of Muharram, others rejoice for the new year. Are both of these acceptable and practiced widely? Is it just a matter of who would like to look at it one way or the other? Are there any scholarly preferred way to commemorate Muharram? The mourning in the month of Muharram is a function of Shia Islam. And the mourning that takes place in Muharram and the first days of Safar are the 40 days that are used in the Shia world to commemorate and to honor the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Now, there are two things that you need to keep in mind to understand the answer to this question. Number one is that Muharram is a pre-Imam al-Hussein and Karbala holiday. So Imam al-Hussein was killed in the Battle of Karbala that took place after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ by several years. In other words, when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina and he found the Jews fasting on Muharram, and he told us to fast on Muharram, and we have all of these traditions that, Abraham was saved from the fire on Muharram, and Jonah came out of the whale on Muharram, and all of these, Nuh alayhi salam found land after the flood on the day of Muharram. All of these are pre-Karbala, obviously in ancient history. So the commemoration of the day of Muharram is established by these traditions. Some of them are extremely sound and some of them are not so sound, but collectively they mention the honoring that we honor the day by fasting, as Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was fasting on the day of Karbala when he was assassinated and murdered, and the tawassa to expand on ourselves on the day of Ashura, because this is a day that the Prophet ﷺ told us to expand. This has nothing to do with joy or happiness at the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein, because there are some people in the Shia world that say that's ludicrous, that's insane that anyone would even link the two together. So the Sunni ulama say, out of respect for what happened in Karbala, because it is a calamity of the highest magnitude for all of Islam, we are not to show outward signs of joy or rejoicing on the day of Ashura, on the 10th day of Muharram. So that's our attitude towards it as Sunni Muslims. We mourn the loss of Imam al-Hussein. We talked about it on Friday a little bit. It's something that we can remember. There are short histories that have been written about the Battle of Karbala that can be read, about not just the massacre of Imam al-Hussein, but the other other members of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, etc. But the idea of complete black and complete mourning for the entire month of Muharram, that's not part of the Sunni tradition, nor do we see that necessarily as being something that matches what happened with Imam. Our job is to be like Imam al-Hussein and not that. As far as the new year, yes, we celebrate the new year because the new year is the new year. It's a new opportunity. We celebrate all the days of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Allah says in the Quran, whoever honors the signs of Allah, this is a sign of your taqwa. So rejoicing, we wouldn't do anything extra on the first day of Muharram more than we would do, on the day to commemorate the Isra and Ma'raj or something like that. So we commemorate this we remember the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. We remember the struggles of the early Muslim community. We remember the establishing of the community in Medina. We remember the genius of Imam Umar, of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, who established the date and the calendar, etc., as we did also a couple of weeks ago. So this is how we commemorate that. It has nothing to do with this massacre that happened later. Because the massacre of Imam al-Hussein is a massacre for all of Islam, for all Muslims. It has nothing to do with Sunnis and Shias. Next question. My teenage son is seemingly online playing games or on his phone excessively. Can this be seen as a sin for wasting time? Or is it better to leave religion out of this widespread issue with today's youth? No, this is a problem. And it's not just a problem of religion. It's a problem of having a lack of just concern. So if you grow up having feeling or a sense of responsibility and concern for something that's greater than you, you tend to fill your attention and your activities with trying to achieve that which is of the bigger concern. Like, let's say, for example, let's say that there's a bad storm and we're at home and then we lose power. Okay, now we have a bigger concern, right? The bigger concern is we don't have any power. It might be cold outside or it might be too hot outside. So we're going to essentially drop everything and try to figure out how we can substitute the lack of power. Either we get candles, flashlights, a fan, open the window, warm clothes, light clothes, close the curtains, open the, depending on the, so there's a bigger concern. So you're going to fill up your time and your activity with trying to solve that concern. The problem with our children is that, and it's not their fault, it's the world that they have come into, is that they don't care about anything. There's nothing to worry about. Everyone is just looking and in this little zone. But the bigger problem of the imbalance in community and society, so on and so forth, they're not concerned. So the way we solve this is not by telling them this is haram. When is the last time somebody stopped something because it was haram? I mean, sometimes that doesn't work, but rather to help them feel a responsibility for the community. That there are people in the community that need help. There are people in the community that need attention. There are people in the community that are lonely. There are people in the community that are hungry. So that we need to have them feel for the other people and fill their activity, if there's that extra time, with that responsibility. When I was growing up, and I'm not that old, it was common that, in people's 20s, they would get married. It was something that was seen as not abnormal. But now, I mean, people are pushing into their late 30s and 40s, and they delay marriage, or they delay wanting to have children for a whole host of reasons. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm saying the idea of being able to shoulder responsibility at a young age makes somebody serious. When you read the stories of the Sahaba, or you read the stories of the expansion of Islam, for example, a lot of these people were teenagers that were leading vast armies across, North Africa, across continents. Those were, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old people. They weren't just shouldering responsibility, they were changing human history. And that's because they felt this charge, they felt this drive, they felt this mission, this global, civilizational mission. So it lit their fire and they went out to it. But the problem is a lot of our children don't have any fire. There's no gas in the tank. You talk to them, you ask them, what do they like? What do you want to do? Everything is just so plain. Imam al-Ghazali, he says that's a sign of a sick soul. If nothing makes you angry, if you don't care about anything, nothing makes you angry at all, then that's a problem. And one of the solutions that our teachers taught us is to help your children shoulder responsibility. Okay, there's a question here about dress code. If men wear short pants and cover only their knees, is that sufficient? What if women, so the what needs to be covered for a man to pray, I'm assuming that's the question, is from above the navel to right below the knees. But don't come into the mosque like that. That's disgusting. You have to, dress properly. But technically, that's what a man needs to cover. What if, so not everything that's permissible means you go and do it. So when we have these rules and these boundaries, it's for us to understand the ruling of something. It doesn't mean that you're going to come into the mosque shirtless, because we will ask you to cover yourself. If a woman simply wears a scarf covering their hair, and of course wear a blouse that covers their bosom, is that sufficient? Yes, when a woman prays, the only thing that should be seen is her face, her hands, and her feet. Some cultures dress up on Jummah day to celebrate. Should this be the norm? Jummah is the greatest day of the week, and it's the weekly Eid, the Prophet ﷺ said. So honoring Jummah is, again, like we said a little while ago, is a sign of honoring the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. When are celebratory nasheeds sung as a group? When there's a celebration, when there's a wedding, when there's a feast, when there's a graduation, when there's an Eid, if somebody finished memorizing the Quran, or we were reading or studying this long book and we finished it, so out of celebration, the day of Ashura, the day of the Mawlid of the Prophet. So these are the occasions in which we would sing a nasheed or we would have this type of halal entertainment. In some groups, instruments are not used, like in Quran combined with song, but in song, only drums and instruments are used in North America. Please elaborate on the acceptable practices. Well, there should be no instruments at all when it comes to the recitation of the Quran. The recitation of the Quran is something that is purely with the voice, following the rules of tajweed. So there should be no instruments at all. The Quran is not sung, the Quran is recited. As far as musical instruments are concerned, the ulama have different opinions on the musical instruments because there is many hadith that talk about the negative aspects of music and musical instruments. I follow the opinion that musical instruments are permissible as long as the music itself and the environment in which the music is being performed is an environment that we would classify normally as good, not bad. So let's say, for example, we had a Turkish musical group that was visiting and they play classical Ottoman music that's all Islamic and Sufi or something like that. And we brought them to the mosque and we had a special evening for them to show us these classical instruments and these classical, this classical Islamic music. Okay, that's one environment. And then we're going to go downtown and we're going to go clubbing on a Friday night and there's music. That's another environment. So the environment, what we call in al-fiqh, al-hay'a, al-ijtima'iyya, the social environment around which these hadith are mentioned, for the ulama that say that musical instruments are permissible, is a critical part in understanding where music is permissible and where it's not permissible. So keep those two sort of examples in mind. As long as the music is considered good, then we would say that it is halal. If the music was bad, we would say it is haram. Are nasheeds a Sufi thing or much broader? No, nasheeds are poems that are sung. And the Sahaba sang in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. One of the great Sirah scholars, Ibn Sayyid al-Nas, rahimahullah, he has a book called Minah al-Midah, where he has cataloged over 300 companions, men and women, who sang in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. And this happened in the masjid of Rasulullah ﷺ. So when Arabic is put to poetry, there's a way that the poetry is recited. And that recitation of the poem based on the meter of the poem, this is where the nasheed comes from. So it has nothing, it's not a thing that is specific to Sufism. It's a thing that is specific to the Arabic language and the meter of the Arabic poetry. And the rhythm of reciting these poems is how things, why the Arabs, were known to have very good memory. It does also exist in the world of tasawwuf, but again, in the world of tasawwuf, it's still a function of the language and how the language is expressed. For the Mawlid, what is appropriate? Well, what is appropriate in the Mawlid is that we exalt our remembrance of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That is the point of the day of the Milad, is that Allah Ta'ala has blessed us with being the ummah of Sayyidina Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And that the greatness of Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ is nothing that any language can exhaust. There's no way to exhaust how much we praise and honor our beloved Prophet ﷺ. So the day of the Milad is a day that we have an opportunity, that we have to express that and to remind ourselves of why that is so important. So what is appropriate is anything and everything that we can do that achieves that. And that it's one of those things where every year we should resolve to outdo what we did the year before. We're going to do more than what we did the year before. We're going to motivate more people. We're going to have more praise. We're going to have more joy. There's so much misery and sadness all around us. This is a day of joy and happiness, and a day for us to remember and reconnect to what is most important to us. In some North African countries, before Jummah, nasheeds are sung before the adhan commences. Please share your experience and guidance. There is a tradition for that. Of course, it is a sunnah to praise the Prophet ﷺ after the adhan. The Prophet ﷺ, as is narrated in Sahih Muslim, He says, if you hear the mu'adhin, إذا سمعت المؤذن فقولوا ما يقول, say what he says, ثم صلوا عليه, and then pray upon me. So the sunnah is that after the adhan is done, after the mu'adhin says La ilaha illallah, that there's a moment pause and that he does a prayer on the Prophet ﷺ. This is in the sunnah, it's in Sahih Muslim, but it became a sign of Sunni Islam after Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi reconquered Egypt, because Egypt up until the up until Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi was under Fatimid control, and they were a Shia, a sect of Shiism. And under the Fatimids, they used to curse the companions, some of the companions, at the adhan. After the adhan, they would curse some of the companions. So because this happened for some time, Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi used this sunnah tradition to re-sunnify Egypt and the parts of North Africa that the Fatimids had been in control, and reviving the sunnah, and that's one of the reasons why it became popular. But some people falsely attribute it to him as he's the origin of that. No, it's in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. In some countries, the mu'adhin will do the nasheed before the adhan at Fajr prayer, so to wake people up. So they'll do some salawat, or they'll recite some Quran or something like that, and then they'll do the adhan. So maybe for 10-15 minutes, and then that will sort of get people, oh, I hear adhan is coming, and then Allahu Akbar, etc. So all of these have purpose. It's not we're singing, like church music. There's a purpose behind that. But this should not be done, for example, with the Maghrib adhan, because the time for Maghrib is very short. So we finish the adhan for Maghrib, and then we immediately will do the Iqamah and pray. ICCP is the only place in our area where the qira'at is recited before Jummah commences. Some have wondered if ICCP is doing the right thing or it is bid'ah. How can reciting the Quran be bid'ah? Just ask yourself that question. I mean, the ludicrousness of some people is beyond me. How can reciting the Quran be bid'ah? It's a sunnah to recite the Quran and to listen to it. The Prophet ﷺ used to ask the Sahaba to recite the Quran and he would listen to them. And the reason we do it on Friday is that this is the day of gathering, that this is our weekly Eid. This is where we have the most amount of people. So it's a sunnah to listen to the Quran. Because what if we don't listen to the Quran? What are we going to do for those 10, 15, 20 minutes before Jummah? We're all going to be talking, or on our phones, or checking our email or social media. So is it better to listen to the Quran or to do that? So people who think like that, don't even respond to them. Or I tell them to come and speak to me. And I'll tell them, I'll teach them what's right from what's wrong. But if somebody can't get it, through their mind, they don't understand this and they just repeat things because they heard something. The Prophet ﷺ said this is a sign of a liar. كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ كَذِبًا أَنْ يُحَدِّثَ بِكُلِّ مَا سَمِعَ. It's enough to be called a liar that you repeat everything that you hear. So when you hear something, the reason it goes in this way is that it has to go through here before it comes out here. So use this and think before you. Not you, but the people that say this, they need to think. Okay, some last minute questions that came on the phone. Is the sunset time exactly the breaking time of the fast, or we have to wait for 5 minutes to break the fast? The minute the mu'adhin says the hamza, Allahu Akbar, that hamza, that means Maghrib has come in. Immediately you can break your fast. The mu'adhin, he has to wait a moment after the real Maghrib has come in. It's called tamkeen. He has to be sure that the time has come in. So it's on the mu'adhin. But the minute you hear the Allahu Akbar, that's it. Maghrib has come in, you break your fast. And it is a sunnah to break your fast right away and to delay the suhoor. So you don't have to wait 5 minutes. And the adhan is an important job. And the adhan needs to be taught. So there is an etiquette to the adhan. There's a way that the adhan is supposed to be recited. Of course, there are different opinions in the different madhahib, but barring those minor differences, like this thing that I just said about the tamkeen, whoever's going to give the adhan here, if there's maybe a group of 5-6 people, they need to learn these things because it's very important, because upon the adhan, there are other things that will happen. Last Friday, the time of the Iqamah for Fajr prayer at the mosque changed from 5:15 to 5:30. but the adhan was at 4:40. That means we had to wait 40 minutes for the fard prayers. Can we switch the adhan time near to aqama time? The other way around. Can you bring the aqama to, you don't change the adhan. Adhan time is when the prayer comes in. You can't change the adhan time. Can you make the aqama earlier? You can, but that's up for the masjid to decide. It's not my decision. Why is there so much time? If the adhan is at 4:40, is it more likely that people will come at 4:45 in the morning or at 5:30? It's more likely that people will come at 5:30. So the adhan, the aqama for fajr is usually the longest waiting time of all of the 5 prayers, exactly for this reason. In the summertime, but when it's winter time, and fajr is 6 or something like that, maybe you can have a short time. So this is something for the board or for the management to decide the time. From the Sharia point of view, is it permissible to make it 40 minutes or 10 minutes? It's permissible. Sometimes I come to the mosque not knowing that the aqama time is later, and I pray. Whoever's here, I lead the jama'ah, and then I sit down, I'm meeting with somebody, and then maybe half an hour later, I find somebody comes in, they make the adhan, and there's another. So sometimes it's delayed, and you just need to know. But can you make the aqama earlier? You can make the aqama earlier. Okay, those are all the questions that I have. I think there's one that's on the chat. Is it permissible to attend a non-Muslim friend's wedding? Asking, since these weddings typically have alcohol, etc. Yes, you can go to the wedding, but don't drink. That's what matters. Just like if you go to a restaurant and the restaurant has alcohol, you're not going to drink the alcohol because we live in a non-Muslim environment. This is a non-Muslim country. If we were in a Muslim majority country and there was a wedding in which there was alcohol, you can't go to that because there's alcohol. So the place that we are in affects how the rulings are manifest. The grocery store, they sell pork products, they sell alcohol. I mean, alcohol is so haram, it's even haram to look at it. It's haram to look at it. It's haram to carry it. It's haram to sell it. It's haram, it's haram, it's haram, it's haram. So yeah, it's a big deal, of course, but in this environment, it's, wajib for people. That's how they live their life. For most people that are not Muslim, it's an integral part of their life. And they have a little bar at home. It's almost like, if you think about it, it's almost like a shrine. Like they have a place where all the alcohol bottles are and all the glasses are. And it's like how we would, if you came into one of our homes and there would be the Quran, or there would be like a poster or, of like the description of the Prophet. This is like a special place for us. If you go to a person's that's not Muslim, alcohol, there's a whole way that you drink, and etiquette, and what you drink at what time, and how you clink your glasses. It's a whole cult. It's like a religion, really. So you have to understand that that's the environment that we're in. So go and don't drink the alcohol. Well, don't drink the alcohol, period. But you know what I mean. Can we eat from restaurants where there is no halal meats? If you're not going to eat them, if you can eat other than the meat, meaning, if you want to go and have a salad, that's fine. Is that the question? Or are you asking, can you eat non-zabiha meat? Non-zabiha meat, we talked about that. We can talk about that another time. Or you have to ask specifically. I'm not going to assume. It is my understanding that a particular sect of Islam denies the hadith narrated by Aisha alayhi salam. Is it true if you deny any part of the hadith, you are denying part of the Quran? Is it true if you deny part of the hadith, you are denying part of the Quran? Of course, if you deny all of the hadith, somebody denied all of the hadith, then that is a belief of disbelief. That is a kufr belief. Sorry, if somebody rejects all of the hadith, that is disbelief. Because part of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah is that you believe in the Quran and you believe in the hadith. But this person is rejecting some of the hadith. So this is a person of bid'ah. Why are they rejecting the hadith? Are they rejecting the hadith because they've critiqued the chain of transmission and they found some weakness according to them? That's ijtihad. Or are they critiquing this hadith because they don't like Sayyidah Aisha? That's a problem, because Sayyidah Aisha is our mother. وَأَزْوَاجُهُ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ. The wives of the prophets, alayhinna salam, are our mothers, all of them. So how can I not respect my own mother? That's a problem. And that is one of the problems between the Sunnis and the Shia, is that the Shia don't take certain hadith from certain companions that they believe fought against Imam Ali alayhi salam. And that's part of the reconciliation, the dialogue that is between the Sunnis and the Shia. Can the Imam lead the prayer online while someone is praying somewhere else? No. We talked about this in the beginning of COVID, and I told you that it won't work because of the distances. There are two problems. Number one is that people will end up becoming in front of the Imam. Number two is that the distance between the Imam and the person is greater than the distance that is allowed in the Sharia for a contiguous prayer. If we were here in the mosque praying and we had rows going all the way to the street, and then we had overflow praying in the church behind us, and they were following the Imam from a screen, that would work. Because the distance between the last row and then the next row after that is a permissible distance, and it's the Imam is in front, etc. But this virtual world where I'm going to pray behind an Imam who's in Australia and I'm in Timbuktu, no, that doesn't work at all. These online things don't work. So what we did during COVID, if you remember, is that we had the Friday message. So we would give the message as if it was the Jummah, and then afterwards people would pray 4 rak'ahs of dhuhr at home on their own. That's how we did it. Oh, they're asking about non-zabiha meat. Non-zabiha meat, yani,
also try chocolate.
we in this area we have enough options to get zabiha meat. Zabiha or kosher, it's very easy to find. We can't eat meat that is not slaughtered. There is a minor position in the Maliki madhab that says if a Jew or a Christian, if a person min Ahl al-Kitab eats this food, that's what's meant by the verse, which would allow us to eat and consume the regular meat and chicken. It's a very weak opinion. And the problem with that is that halal food, what you eat, will affect your dua being answered. It has a deeper meaning. It's not just about having access to food. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Atab mat'amak takun mustajab ad-du'a." Make sure what you consume is halal, and then Allah Ta'ala will answer your prayer. Imam Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, one of the great Shafi'i jurists, in his Fatawa collection, he says that they found in observing why some towns there's khair, there's goodness, and other towns there's not goodness. He said, we discovered it's because in the towns where there's no goodness, people don't eat halal food. Not eating halal food, it has really detrimental spiritual effects. So if you're a believer, I highly caution you against that opinion, and I ask that you make the effort to find halal food. As a Muslim, we wouldn't attend a gay wedding because we do not support it. In the same way, would we not attend a wedding of a Muslim woman marrying a non-Muslim man? Well, the thing about gay marriage is that it's not, in our Sharia, it's not a marriage. For the marriage to happen, there has to be a man and a woman. So there's no, the marriage has not taken, it's nothing. It's not a contract. There's nothing there. It's not that we don't support it, of course, for moral reasons, but contractually, because marriage is a contract, as part of contract law, there is no contract that has occurred. As far as a Muslim woman marrying a non-Muslim man, attending that wedding, I mean, it's too, I can't answer the question like that. Of course, a Muslim woman can't marry a non-Muslim man. That's haram by consensus. Nobody in the history of Islam has ever said otherwise. The issue is, can you affect change? Can you affect a conversion? Can you affect, maybe you're the only Muslim person left, etc., etc. So you have to weigh. Don't take this position, oh, that's haram, I'm not going to be a part of it. That's noble, it's meritorious that you want to do that, but at the same time, somebody's saying there's too much background noise. It's just me, and there's like 3 people here. Maybe you have the background noise. There's no background noise. You guys aren't hearing anything, right? There's like 5 people here. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so my answer to that question is, you have to see, is your presence in that sister's life an added value? Maybe it's just a change of intention. Maybe you tell her, I don't, this is not permissible, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you try to make, something happen. Or it's just she's far gone, it's a far gone conclusion, she doesn't want to hear anything, and then you decide not to go. It depends. So don't cut the tie because you might be the only link. Where were all these questions on the support email? Why am I getting them now? I'm too soft on you guys. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Okay. Can a person who has two girls, one is special needs, write in his will that everything goes to them only? You can make a trust, you can make a waqf for your children and structure things in a way. Don't do what's written in the question. No, you can't do that. But what you can do is you can create a waqf, and in your lifetime you can fund that waqf, and then that waqf has beneficiaries afterwards. Can Muslims have a dog in the house? Can parents disown their daughter if she marries a non-Muslim? Okay, this will be the last questions because Maghrib is coming in. Can a Muslim have a dog in the house? You can have a dog in the house. If you do, my recommendation is to have one room that the dog doesn't enter, because there is a hadith that the angels do not occupy the same place as the dogs. So that will be the prayer room, for example. So let's say, for example, we had a dog here on our property. We wouldn't allow the dog here in the prayer hall, but the dog could be outside, or by the barn, or over here in the garden or something like that. It's a guard dog. That's fine. But we're not going to have the dog come in here, except if there was a person who had a service animal, in which case we would allow that person to come in with a service animal, because we would simply follow the position of Imam Malik radiallahu anhu. Well, anyway, if you're having a dog in the house, you're following the position of Imam Malik, because it's not permissible in the other madhab. So you can have a dog, but you have to just try to keep one space that's for prayer. And then the last one is, can the parents disown their daughter if she marries a non-Muslim? I mean, I don't know what the word disown really means, but you can, show your displeasure. And again, like the previous question, try to affect the change, because if the man says the shahada, then all of that's going away. But when the angels wouldn't come wherever the dog is, I said that they won't come. That's just, so you have a dog knowing that that's what's going to happen. So do you want that to happen in your house or not? It's up to you. Okay. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.